Yeah.
Dead in the middle of little did we know.
I'm serious about mine. I'm so sincere.
Now at last I have seen a judgment of Solomon.
It's the people that, always talking about it, always having an issue, usually be undercover. So giving a little bit of tips for the ladies out there too. If the guy is obsessed with gay people or is overly talking about how he ain't this and them faggots that, your dude more than likely is a down low dude.
Now here's the interesting part about this, man. And look, shouts out to everybody in chat. Look, man, I'm gonna be real with y'all. Young Bug, as far as his music goes, I thought he made some of the best albums out of G Unit. I mean, The Game did the documentary, he did Doctor's Advocate, and then he started getting all over the place. But, some was that bluesy riff. I thought Young Bug had a lot of personality in his bars, right? But here's the thing about it. Even now and then I may go back and listen to some of his old shit. But, when this information broke, originally I wasn't like, oh, let me jump right in. I mean, we know it had been floating around for a moment. But here's the thing about it. Young Bug got on there, right? And he's telling everybody on social media, social media. He's like, man, that ain't me. I don't care what y'all say.
I also want to give a round of applause to our patrons. It's been growing. It's almost at 100 people that are here on our Patreon as patron,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yes.
And I just want to give a round of applause to all of you. And of course, we're growing every day on our Patreon, trying to understand exactly what people want to listen to. Again, we saw that conspiracies and relationship conversations were the top two topics for people for what they want to listen to on our Patreon. And again, we really do appreciate it. Any constructive criticism will help. And also, right now, we want to know your thoughts on this particular subject as well. Does anybody have any questions for us or something that they feel they want us to touch on the next live stream as well? Because again, we want to collect as much data from y'all legally, not illegally, like what happened with Facebook, or Facebook, I should say. But we want to collect information from y'all that y'all are willing to share, certain topics that you want us to talk about. So if you have any questions that you have for us, just put it in the chat room right now. We're still live. And also, we did get a chance to see part 1 of the Bobby Brown story. I got to say, it was really well produced, the production. I heard that Bobby Brown directed it. Very well done. And nobody came off looking clean, though, in that series, in that mini-series. And, some people feel Bobby got off or made himself look like a victim or whatever the case may be. But I actually believe that everybody looked bad in there except for the older brother, except for Bobby's older brother. I think Bobby Brown did a lot of fuck shit. Whitney Houston did a lot of fuck shit. I'm not going to lean and say they are automatically bad people. Again, Whitney being repeatedly molested at a young age, and you know how the church is. Fucking church. They're dusty, so ignored it. Bobby Brown seeing his close friend get stabbed and bleed to death while looking at him, and then the deaths that surrounded his life and the pressure that he had. The pressure of both Whitney and Bobby of, the poverty, you having to be the one to be successful, bringing in the money to take care of everybody, take care of your sisters, your brothers, and all that. I can't talk about that. I can't, be in their shoes. I can be analytical and say, of course, you fucked up with your children, both Bobby and Whitney, especially when it came to Bobby Christina, because we saw what happened to her. But overall, I'm just analyzing them as human beings, the gray areas, the nuances of the mini documentary. And in my personal opinion, I think that the audience, when they look at it, they shouldn't be talking about just, oh, Bobby was with Janet. I think they should focus on the fact that look where you don't want to be. Bobby had a lot of talent. Whitney had a lot of talent. But look how at the end of that day, childhood trauma, certain issues or traits they already probably had, all that's environment, all that mixed together. Look how at the end of the day that talent, that gift didn't overcome those vices, those things. Also having children not seek therapy, no therapist after traumatic events. So there's a lot of things that people should actually be studying, especially if you're somebody who's also going into the industry, but not exclusively so. Just as a human being, period. It's very important for people to seek therapists, to make sure that their children are mentally healthy. That's what I saw as the core of the show for me. What about you, Prince?
We talked about it. We saw the same thing. And shouts out to Sonny. We appreciate you. He says, congrats on the 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. Prince and Sincere. The biggest issue here, before anything else gets started, before people start criticizing Bobby and Whitney about how they raised their children, the real issue, what you guys should reflexively be looking at, is if you did suffer childhood trauma, get therapy first. Get therapy. It's very important, for all of us. Whatever you're going through. Some of us grew up in these areas, and we see so many things as a young child, as a baby, that it's been normalized. Our parents may tell us, oh, well, this is what happened, but go back to school. This is what happened, but go back to work. And what you have is a lot of repressive issues, a lot of repressive anxiety, a lot of repressive fear that builds throughout your adulthood, right? So what happens is you don't get a chance to break the generational curse, right? So whatever hangups that you're having in your childhood, it don't matter who you think you are. That's the arrogance. There's the arrogance and the ego. It doesn't matter what you think you've solved. If you have witnessed childhood trauma, if you've experienced childhood trauma with your parents, your mother or your father, you're bringing all of that into your relationship with that other significant person, right? And then also you're bringing that into the life of a child as well. So what I saw from Bobby and Whitney, at least on this end, because we've had variations of biopics for Whitney's story, but we never really had one outside of the New Edition story of a Bobby Brown's, right? So you can't take everything as the noted gospel truth, but you get an idea, an understanding of maybe where Bobby Brown comes from, right? But what was evident, though, even the stuff that he was dealing with growing up, by the time he got to Whitney Houston with all of his unresolved issues, here you saw Whitney Houston snoring coke in a room when he walked in. It was clear Whitney Houston, even at that point in time, she had already dealt with a lot of stuff, and she was getting by with what she could and coping with it in the way she could. She coped with it by way of drugs. He was coping with his issues from his childhood and everything else as an adult male and all the stuff he's seen in his life. He was coping with it by way of sex. And I'll tell you firsthand, there's many men out there who are doing that because, the culture in itself, this is why we had this young buck situation. It's not as open to saying, okay, young male, especially black male, open yourself up. For a lot of guys, for a lot of us, it is sex. It is when we have our orgasm in a woman or different women, we feel like, okay, this takes my mind off all the bullshit. This makes me escape. And that's what you saw Bobby Brown, his character, escapism through sex. And it can happen with men and women, but because it's Bobby Brown, that's what I'm talking about. When you see him sleeping around, he can't control himself. It's because of a lot of unresolved issues in his personal life. And I think that's what people should walk away from the Bobby Brown story with more than anything else, is getting a hold to your demons before you pass them on to your children. Because that's exactly what happened with Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston, that Bobby Christina inherited those demons, and she didn't even get to live as long as Bobby Brown or Whitney Houston. I mean, she died very young. So that's what I walked away with the Bobby Brown story. As far as that goes, very good, little mini series. I thought it was well directed. The actor that played Bobby Brown, I think he did a damn good job. Mekhi Phifer did a good job.
My God,
when they played the lady that played Bobby Brown's mother, very strong, powerful actor. So it was a very good series, much better than the Straight Outta Compton shit. I'm just saying, there's some shit I couldn't believe.
And for me, another thing to add on. I had a lot of sympathy and empathy for all parties involved on that series, the Bobby Brown story. Um, you know, applauded Whitney and Bobby Brown for eventually getting off drugs. But sometimes certain things are just too late. When you have children, that's when all of it changes. I think to an extent, prior to having a child, Bobby and Whitney were victims. They were victims from their parents. Sexual abuse for Whitney. The traumatic trauma for Bobby and all that. They were victims. But my also personal opinion though is once you have a child, then you become a victimizer, which also what Bobby and Whitney did. Not sexually to their children, but absent the drug use. It resulted into the death of Bobby, Christina, and we all do have to be realistic for that. Bobby and Whitney, what took place with them is you have to put it on them as parents because of them doing drugs in front of Bobby, Christina. But at the same time, that's the whole tragic of not ending the curse of two people who were dysfunctional, who were victims that eventually became victimizers in their own way. And by the time they did the right thing, because I do believe in redemption. If you can't understand or look things or allow people to redeem themselves, then you shouldn't ask for forgiveness for yourself. But it's just consequences that everybody have to keep in mind. You may come out of something, but at what cost? What are you going to lose while you're going down that hill? What casualties are going to go down that hill with you before you start climbing back up? And that's something else that people should take from the story as well, is not to overly criticize anybody, but to understand that the errors you make in life, sometimes it just ain't you that go down. There's a lot of people that go down with you.